All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 392 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. This is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of marriage and family and trying to get as married as young as possible in a healthy way according to God's design. My name is Seth Hensley. I'm your host, and I come on every week on Thursday and Sunday to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but I try to equip and encourage you in your pursuit of that goal. And today we're going to be reviewing a video entitled Why Christians Are Struggling to Find Love Today. A very, very cool documentary video that is highly edited and has a lot of information in it. In other words, this is the kind of video that you can't just sit down and make like what I do. You can just kind of sit down, hit a button, record something, talk for 30 minutes, edit the content in a minor way, and then upload it, add a bio and stuff, and there you go. That's your finished product. But this kind of video is something that takes a long time to make, and so it's the kind of video that you can really appreciate a lot of things in. I'm really excited to review it for you. She's going to give you a lot of numbers. She's going to give you a lot of stats. She's done a lot of research on this video, and it's highly edited. So that means that she has put a lot of time into producing this video, even after she stopped the record button. And so just kind of appreciate that as we go through it. But really enjoyed the couple minutes of it that I watched to figure out whether or not I wanted to review it for you. I'm excited to see the rest of it. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
There was a time when dating meant one thing: finding the person you would marry. But in just a few decades, that purpose has faded. Hookup culture, dating apps, and redefined ideas of love have reshaped how we see relationships, and not always for the better. What was once sacred has somehow become disposable, often treated like a game. So the question is, how did we get here, and what does it mean for people of faith?
Well, one of the big ways that we find ourselves in the situation that we have today, where dating and marriage are often seen as either optional or experimentation and discovery processes, is the sexual revolution and the invention of the birth control pill, and the fact that we started teaching our young children that marriage was an option rather than a norm, and it was something that is not a matter of calling, and it's not a matter of purpose, and it's not something that God has actually designed 99% of young people for. It's just this thing that you can sort of do if you want. And because of the birth control pill, we suddenly have control over our reproduction, and the normal consequence of having a sexual relationship with somebody, a child, was removed, and you could then kind of do whatever you want, or so we thought, without consequence. We're going to get into, I've gotten into the past why that's not actually the case. You actually do have the risk of running STDs. Emotional entanglement is always accompanying sexual interaction. And of course, you can always have children no matter how many forms of contraception you're actually on. And so for those reasons and others, I would say that that sex is not actually consequence free. And that's a opinion that a lot of people don't have today because of our newfound technology in the birth control pill and condoms and things like that. But in reality, you really can't separate, again, the consequences that accompany a sexual interaction with somebody from the act itself, because I think that's the way God's designed it. I think it will always be like that. And so, you can do certain things to hinder those consequences, but in the end, you're still going to get bad consequences from that behavior just because you're not doing it the way God designed. Again, just to throw out a few, your pair bonding, your ability to pair bond is thrown off if you're running around having sex with everybody. You can still end up with children doing that. It's not contraception is not actually contraception because it doesn't actually work all the time. And you can always get STDs and things like that. So those are a couple reasons that you can give people who act like hookup culture is just totally consequence free and you can do whatever you want without consequence today. And again, marriage has kind of gone down also because we've been teaching our children that marriage is an option rather than a norm. And I think the reason that a lot of parents have been doing that is because they have either had a poor marriage themselves or they've seen a lot of poor marriages modeled for them and therefore present marriage to their children as an option so that if their children do decide to go into it and experience difficulties that accompany bad decisions, those parents do not feel guilty because they say, well, I told you it was an option and you chose that path and here we are. And it's kind of this pressure that parents put on themselves. They're like, your marriage, they believe this false divorce statistic that 50% of marriages end in divorce. And they think that marriage is kind of setting their children up for failure and separation and divorce and time in court and just a lot of fighting. And that's not what marriage has to be. In fact, The real divorce rate is nowhere near 50%. In my state of Ohio, you can actually look it up on the CDC. There's only like a handful of people out of every 1,000 individuals that actually gets a divorce. And that might not be as low a percentage as you think it means divorce is, because those 1,000 people include children and, older people. It includes everybody, not just, adults ages, 18 to 23, prime marrying age, in my opinion. And so, I don't know. You've just got to take that into consideration. The actual percentage of divorces that happen in this, let's just keep it at a state level. In this state is more, it's a harder statistic to get in an accurate way. And so I usually don't give the actual percentage of divorces because I've been unable to work out the numbers myself as to what it is. But it is like a handful of people out of every 1,000 people in the state of Ohio. So like 5 to 6 people, I think 3 to 6 people out of every 1,000 will end up getting a divorce. And that's the most accurate information I've been able to find according to the CDC. But people don't believe that. They think it's a lot easier to get divorced, and that happens a lot more than it does. And so they end up telling their children either that it's an option, that marriage is an option, and caution them when the children show interest in pursuing it, or they raise their children, thinking that marriage is an option rather than a norm and something that they're intended for. And then the kids kind of are aimless and have no vision and cannot decide whether or not to get married. And I don't know, it just delays the marriage age. And we've also made it harder to get married on the financial side because things are harder to afford, and you have to go to school around my geographical area, at least, to get a good enough job to support a family. And so that's 4 years of your life that you got to commit before you get married and stuff. So there's just a lot of complicated issues going into it. And all the stuff I give you had their caveats and exceptions and things like that. But those are just a few reasons that marriage is shaped up the way that it has today.
I've never dated, but I've watched my generation step into a dating world that honestly makes me wonder how Christians are supposed to navigate it. Because today, dating feels less about real connection and more about instant gratification. Hookups, quick attention, or just having someone so you don't feel lonely for 5 minutes. And if you're not dating, people look at you like you're the strange one. But it makes me stop and ask, what's love actually supposed to look like? Well, the Bible says it best. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Now, when I compare that to modern dating,
it's very different. Like protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres. Like those are things that are pretty absent in modern dating, if you ask me. Like protects, oftentimes the connection between two dating couples is totally vulnerable to attack and totally not protected. In fact, sometimes the people in that dating relationship are actually not protecting each other at all. They're just out for their own interests and their own discovery and experimentation process, and are as likely to stab the relationship in the back as some wolf in the world would. And so protection, I don't think so. Hope, I think hope is always there. Hope's very hard to kill, and hope is, obviously, if you're dating somebody that you really, really want to marry, hope is going to be present there, but it oftentimes it leads to disappointment because people did not clarify the intentions of the relationship up front. They didn't make either their position clear, or their partner did not make his or her position clear, and so they find themselves in a situation of breakup because one party was more committed than the other was, and then one party decided to bail because they found out that he or she, did not want to be in that relationship anymore. And so, yeah, hope is there, but I don't think it's the kind of hope that Scripture is talking about, where we can expect, like if you look at the Greek word hope in the New Testament that's used a lot, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this. In fact, it would take too long for me to do it on this video, but I kind of want to go and look up the word hope for you, but I'm pretty sure it means an expectation of good things in the future, not like I hope something or I wish something good comes true. It's a lot more active instead of passive, the way the word is used in the New Testament. And so people have that hope for dating, but oftentimes it's more of a wish rather than an expectation that the relationship will lead to marriage. Either because, again, they haven't clarified their intentions for dating up front, or their partner's not made his or her position clear. And so one party's more committed than the other and the relationship falls apart. Always protects, always hopes, always trusts. So trust in a relationship. I think that sadly, we're not seeing a lot of that either. You have a lot of pornography addiction and cheating and infidelity in relationships nowadays. I don't think that there's a lot of trust there. And so it's just kind of what you're starting to see develop. The pattern that you're starting to see develop is the fact that modern dating really is not like the biblical definition of love in any way. Last one, perseveres, is I would say this is the one that dating fails at the most. And oftentimes people approach dating again like an experimentation or discovery process, figuring out whether or not they want to marry somebody. So they get committed to this person. They have a DTR, they define the relationship, they enter this committed dating thing, moving towards the goal of marriage, even though they don't know whether or not they want to marry this person. And it seems to me that it's just a terrible idea to get emotionally invested in something that you don't know is permanent. And so oftentimes, instead of persevering, they just take the first back door out that they left for themselves at the start of the relationship because they weren't confident in their odds, frankly. And so I don't really think that dating has any of the, biblical definitions of what love is. And so let's just go through that. Always protects, always trusts. Let's look at this verse in the Bible. It is 1 Corinthians 13:7. 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter, for those of you who didn't know. I use Bible Hub to pull up my verses online because I really, really, really like it. It gives you the actual original language words that the New Testament authors used in the Greek. And you can actually look at what those words meant and do kind of in-depth studies on them. And I prefer that much to the paperback copies of the Bible that she was using, for instance, on her screen, because of how much studying you're capable of doing with the internet. That's one of the amazing things about the internet. And see, look, I'm just going to look up always trusts, and I'm not using the right version, but it's 14:7. So this version says it keeps every confidence. Again, confidence, do we really have that in modern dating? I don't think so, at least not to the extent that, most people would argue. I'm going to look at it in the Strong's NASB here so that you can click on all of these words and I can show you exactly what these words mean. But verse 7 says, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. I want you to look at this word hopes here and compare that to the hope that we have in modern dating. And just let's see if it's the same. The NSB, it is used to say hope, hoping, hoped, fix hope, set hope, to expect. And this is the word right here that I want to highlight for you, the expect word. The way that this hope word, it's called El Pizzo, I don't exactly know the pronunciation. I think it's right down here. El Pizzo is how you say it. El Pizzo means, or can mean, to expect. And that is a very different meaning than the way we use the word hope. Again, we use the word hope like wish. I wish this would happen. Okay, but the way that this word has been used in the Bible can mean to expect. Okay, so if you have hope, the biblical sense of hope in your dating relationship, then you're expecting it to lead to marriage. Okay, and so I think if you're doing dating the biblical way, that should be something that you announce from the start, and that hopefully you and your partner are on the same team for. It means to hope or expect. It means to expect or confide. It means to trust. It means to actively await God's fulfillment of the faith He has inbirthed through the power of His love. It means to expect or to hope. It means, what else does it mean here? Just a lot of more active. It's used in a lot more of an active sense. So that's totally different than, again, we would use if we were to say the sentence, I hope my relationship works out. We're kind of saying, I wish it works out, and I don't really know if it's going to or not. But if you use it in the biblical sense, it's like, I hope my relationship works out and leads to marriage, means like, I expect my relationship will lead to marriage. And imagine if you had the peace of mind to be able to expect that your relationship would lead to marriage. Like, if you're going into, dating, as I would argue you should, with the purpose of getting married one day, you're going to be filled with a lot more peace if you can actually hope in the biblical sense that your relationship will lead to marriage. But enduring all things, modern dating is not really enduring all things. It barely can endure anything. In fact, the first sign of difficulty or strife, people often bail. They have no commitment to each other a lot of the time, sadly. And so you want to do things a lot more like the scriptural version of love. And your dating relationship's a lot more like the scriptural version of love, and a lot less like the modern dating prescription that modern culture is giving you. And so, totally agree. But if you look at the word to endure here, it means to abide, endure, patiently suffer, tarry behind, endure with patience, patiently endure, persevere, to stay behind, to remain, to figuratively undergo, to bear trials, to have fortitude, to persevere, those are all things that people do not do in their dating relationships for one another. They kind of just Instead, this whole idea is going around like, if you're limiting me as an individual, then see you. I'm going to leave you in the dust. I'm not going to be in a relationship with you because you are making whatever A, B, or C hard on me, and I'm the most important thing in my life, and therefore you're hindering me. So get out of my life. It's just a terrible dating philosophy, and so it's very different. I just wanted you to see to the scriptural definition of love. So if you're running around telling your boyfriend or girlfriend you love him or her, then hopefully you're using the scriptural sense of that and not the modern sense of that.
I don't really see it. Instead, it feels like a lot of people are settling for something less. And that's why I think we need to rewind a few generations to see where everything started to shift.
Yeah.
In the 1950s, over 90% of Americans identified as Christian and church attendance was at its highest. But it wasn't just about attending services. Faith shaped who you dated and who you married. Choosing someone of the same religion wasn't unusual. It was expected. And the goal was simple: marriage and starting a family. Marriage rates were high and people married young.
And you can notice here, just like to look at her last statistic. Hang on one second, I'm going to
And
rewind.
the goal was simple: marriage and starting a family. Marriage rates were high and
Okay, so you can see the highest marriage rate, 78.8%. In 1960, I'm pretty sure it was also at 80% of adults, or around 80% of adults in those years, 1950 to 1960. I've actually seen that people say, like Brad Wilcox, the professor of sociology at the University of Virginia, has argued that in 1960 it was also about 80% of adults ages 18 and older were married. So I'm not argued. I guess that's data he's found, and so just a lot of people. And today, if you'll notice, she has a different marriage rate. She says 46.8% in 2020. I've actually heard it was 49%. So I don't know which one of those measurements is accurate. They're still very close to one another, so it kind of doesn't matter. But you see less than half of adults ages 18 and older being married is a very low number. And it's, we've dropped that like 10, 20, 30, 40%. It's just actually insane. That we're actually finding ourselves more like 30%, that we're actually finding ourselves in this situation today. And, I talked about some of the reasons why before, when people see bad marriages modeled for them over and over and over, it's kind of like they assume that marriage can't be done right. And they assume that marriage can only be done wrong and is always a bad idea all the time. And, I don't know, that's just how one of the ways that we've made a mess of marriage in the past couple of years.
People married young, men in their early 20s and women around 20. Today, the average age of marriage is closer to 30. For many back then, dating had a clear purpose. It was about finding a lifelong partner built on faith and long-term commitment. But somewhere along the way, that clarity started to fade. So the question is, what changed?
You talk about the sexual...
Well, 1960, I imagine here they're going to start talking about the birth control pill and the sexual revolution and how that has impacted marriage. And people began to think that you can have all the benefits of sex without any of the commitment. And I hope they address some of the reasons why that's not actually true. Let's hopefully see what they say.
Revolution, if you want to call it that. It was kind of shocking to me that all these things were going on because my time of day, this was unheard of,
The 1960s would be a decade that completely flipped how society viewed love. The sexual revolution didn't just change dating. It turned it upside down.
My views of sex got slightly warped in those years. You meet somebody, you might end up in bed that day, you might in 2 days be with somebody the next day.
Marriage was no longer the only path, and the Christian values that once shaped relationships were being pushed aside. Suddenly, intimacy wasn't tied to marriage, casual dating became normal, things like premarital sex, contraception, and living together before marriage were becoming widely accepted.
For the first time, it became possible to have a fulfilling sexual and social life outside of marriage.
People's behavior was...
Well, again, that's what we thought at the time. The numbers now are actually showing us that married people have better sex, married people have more frequent sex, married people trust their partner more. There's a lot more, healthy soil from which to grow children in a marriage than there is, compared to any other kind of romantic living situation. You can't really touch marriage as far as the best option in every single department that a relationship between a man and a woman can have. It's just that people like to try to sell this idea that sex outside of marriage is better because they think it's more liberating, when in reality, my question to you is like, if your sexual relationship is not as good in this way, how is that liberated? How is that better in any way than the the version that is producing better satisfaction for both men and women, a higher frequency of sexual interaction for both men and women, higher chance of, giving children a better launching pad from which they can launch themselves into their future careers and have the support that they need from a healthy, committed family, instead of basically being born from a science experiment with no commitment or boundaries or protection whatsoever. Like, jumping out of a plane without a parachute is pretty liberated, but it's also a terrible idea. And that's kind of what we're doing, or what these people in these videos are kind of describing, that you should, and trying to sell you this idea that you should kind of just jump out of a plane without a parachute when it comes to your sexual life. And it's actually like, no, that's really not liberated or good, and doesn't lead to any good consequences in any way. And it's second best at the best. Marriage cannot be touched as far as the best sexual living situation that you can have, as far as the numbers go. And again, like, I'm sure you can get anybody to say anything, but if you actually look at studies that have been done in, like, double-blind studies where people come in and they don't know what is being studied, and they're just answering questions, and they have no reason to lie, and they don't know what the study is that they're participating in, then you're going to start seeing, like, holy cow, hang on a second. If people are actually honest, then marriage is one of the best ways that you can have a healthy sexual life. In fact, it's probably the best way for, not, again, like I say over and over, like 90%, 99% of people, somewhere in there, like most people, 9 out of 10 people are probably designed to not only get married, but that's the only way they can live a healthy sexual life according to God's design, I would argue. Now, maybe you disagree with me. I'd love to hear what you think, but
it's changing faster than their attitudes, so that you would have college students, even in the early 70s, asked whether they had engaged in premarital sex. The vast majority said they had. If they were asked whether they approved of it, the vast majority of the very same group said they disapproved.
What is do you find it difficult or embarrassing in any way, performing sexually or making love on stage?
No, I don't. I think it's a very natural act.
Culture started celebrating this as personal freedom and self-expression, but ironically, this often left people with more confusion than clarity.
By the mid-1960s, a new value system stressing growth, fulfillment, and self-realization had begun to appear. And this new set of values told people that they shouldn't simply accept the way they were living, but should be willing to challenge it. And the result, I think, was a fundamental revolution in American family life. Birth rates fell by half. Divorce rates doubled. The number of couples cohabitating outside of marriage quadrupled.
And again, the reason for those things, birth rates dipping, divorces doubling, and the number of people living together outside of marriage going up, are all because if you believe that you're just in it for you and that's okay, and you're just making life choices for how it benefits you, you're not thinking about anybody else, and you're living a totally self-centered nature, is, all those choices make sense according to that worldview. Children is not about yourself. It's not about, there are amazing happiness things that I think come with children, but it's actually about serving another person, laying your life down for your wife and the future generation instead of yourself. And so people who approach life from this selfish lens of, well, if it's not going to help me and I don't like doing it, I'm not going to spend my time on it in life. Of course, they're just not going to have children. So you see birth rate going down, this idealization of the self and idealization of the self, when in reality, if you're really pursuing what you selfishly want, your life is actually not going to be happy. It's exactly like Jesus says, like the guy looking for his life loses it, and the guy losing his life for the sake of someone else, for Jesus and the sake of the gospel, finds it. It's like whenever you're going through life, like just preserving yourself and preserving your own selfish interests, you're actually going to miss happiness, and you're going to miss a lot of good stuff that you could have had if you would have chosen to lay your life down for other people. Like, you'll never know the intrinsic reward that comes from serving another person if you're just in it for yourself. Okay. So you're missing out on all the good things that come from having children. You're choosing not to get married, and you're choosing to divorce instead because, after all, why not? My spouse is making me mad, and because I'm interested in what I want, I'm just going to dip and bail on this commitment that I made because it's not really good for me right now, because of the 1,000 bad decisions that I've made leading up to this moment of, an explosion or meltdown where the relationship seems hopeless. And so I'm just going to dip. I'm going to bail. I'm going to go back on my word that I was entering this committed relationship with somebody forever, because it's not good for me. Again, that selfish language. It's not good for me. Then you have the people living together, because they're approaching it from a selfish perspective. They're like, well, somebody better might come along for me than you, and so I'm just going to leave myself a backdoor out of this relationship legally, so that I don't have any legal consequences. But we're going to act like we're married. It's like, okay. You're not going to know the joys of a trusting relationship where you are in a relationship with somebody who you know is not going to leave you. That's a beautiful thing that you're entirely missing out on. Again, if you have this selfish worldview, and it's like, I just don't see it. You're missing both things. You're after joy and happiness for yourself, but you're totally missing it in your pursuit of just pleasing yourself. It's like the happiest parts of my life are the parts of my life where I'm actually laying down my life for another person and doing things for other people, namely my wife and children. Like, that's how God's made it to be.
The span of just 10 years, America's families went through more changes than they had gone through in the previous 200 years.
The direction that used to guide dating became a lot less clear, and that shift, it's still shaping how many of us view love and relationships today.
These days, one of the things we talk about the most is the problem of commitment. You're there, the other partner's not entirely emotionally there, and then sometimes...
Okay, stop, freeze. If that's the case, then you should not be dating them. Again, I say this over and over and over on the show, but if they can't match you, if your partner can't match you in interest, investment, commitment, values, just absolute commitment and perseverance to the relationship, then you should not be entering any kind of committed relationship with him or her until she can match you or he can match you in that, okay? You both have to be 100% in. If somebody's 100% in, somebody's like 30% in, somebody's 70% in, that relationship is ending in flames. And one person is always feeling like they don't have a partner who's contributing, and one person is always feeling like they could be abandoned at any moment in the battlefield by the partner who's supposed to love them the most.
You have a situationship.
Young people are prioritising who they want to be a whole lot more. There's a lot more open-mindedness in how we're approaching things.
I want to feel the thrill. I want to be getting my head bashed into the mattress, and then I want to be getting ghosted the next day.
What? Okay, then what you're after, sweetheart, is not an actually good connection with somebody. You're after just some sort of exciting novelty experiment thing. You're not after, and you'll never know the joys of a truly lasting and intimate connection if you're approaching all of your relationships that way. Sheesh.
A 2019 survey in the US found that 47% of adults say dating is harder now than it was 10 years ago. And honestly, it's not hard to see why.
I was scrolling, an hour or 2 hours a day, and it's wasted time, really.
More and more people are turning to professional apps like LinkedIn to find love.
Social media and dating apps promise to...
Yeah, social media is actually, by the way, not social media, but online is the biggest way that spouses find each other in the world nowadays, which I think has its ups and downs. Some of the downs to it is that it broadens your perceived options so much that you actually get paralysis of choice and actually can't lock into a decision because you're always afraid there's a better potential match for you a couple swipes down the line. And in reality, it's like you're losing years that you could have with your partner because you're unwilling to commit to somebody because you're allowing fear, that FOMO, fear of missing out on something better, to prevent you from actually experiencing the joy that God has set in front of you. So that's something bad that I think that has come from it. But I think something good that has come from it is you have access to people in your geographical area who you would never have the chance of meeting if you did not use social media as a tool correctly in the right way. So it's like I found my wife through Instagram, social media networking, like going to other people's friends list that I trust and looking through and seeing if there was anybody that was, my age and had my values and looking to get married and pursuing Christ and that I found attractive. And if I found somebody like that, then hey, suddenly I have a conduit through which I can connect to this person because we have a mutual friend who can introduce us, right? And that's a really good way to meet your spouse. And it sort of doubles your range. Because like you can hop around visiting churches in your geographical area, or you can try to find a partner in your social groups growing up. But if those two things let you down, you're going to have to come up with a way of finding a partner. And so social media can be good for that. But finding your partner online is the number one way people actually find each other nowadays. And again, she's talking about like people who are saying that dating is harder nowadays than it ever has been, which is totally true. If you ask anybody, they're going to say that. But one of the reasons that is again, because we're approaching dating from two different starting points. You have some people approaching dating out of the sexual liberation mindset, out of the experimentation mindset, out of the discovery mindset, out of the let's figure out what I want mindset. And you have some people approaching dating as the road to marriage. And when those people, are trying to find their perspective matches in the crowd of people, it's like, yeah, you have totally different missions. No wonder you find it difficult to actually find somebody, because you're on totally different missions. You don't even want the same thing. You don't even define dating the same thing as each other. You're not even moving towards the same goals. So you can expect to encounter some rough terrain out there. And there are a couple of things those things are things that you need to make sure you're on the same page with somebody before you jump into, again, a committed relationship with
Make
them.
connection easier, but with endless options at your fingertips, do they really help or just make it harder to commit?
New relationship starts on Tinder every 3 seconds.
Among online dating users, 57%.
Okay, freeze. Okay, whatever that stat was. A new relationship starts on Tinder every 3 seconds. Okay, define relationship. Because that relationship that just started on Tinder, 3 seconds ago is also ending 3 seconds later. Like, who cares? I don't care. Like, people advertise. In order for that advertisement for Tinder or whatever to work, you have to define relationship there. And if you're out for a committed, long-term, lasting, intimate, emotional connection with somebody, then that relationship that just started has like 0% chance of ever reaching that. So like, I don't know. That ad just has such a big hole in it, and it's like, I don't know. I don't think that online dating is the using apps like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge and all that are usually the good ways to do dating. Now, I think they can work and have worked for some people, but I don't think on average it's the best way to find somebody.
Say they've had a positive experience with these platforms. But at the same time, research shows that couples who met online often report less satisfying and less stable marriages compared to those who met offline. So I guess it's not as
I don't know about that one. I mean, I met my wife online, and again, you've got to define. See, I don't know if they're saying online dating here or just meeting your spouse online, because those are two very different things. I didn't meet my spouse through an online dating platform, because most people on there are either just there to hook up, or I haven't used the account in years, or aren't subscribing to the platform and can't even see your picture. So of course they're not going to go on a date with you because they don't know what you look like or something like that. Like if you're using on the internet as a tool that can actually help you to get married, then I think it's totally fine. And my wife and I have an amazing connection. In fact, I couldn't dream of a better one right now. I'm sure our connection will get better. And I'm determined that our connection will get better as we move into our future. But I don't know. I don't know that I buy that study.
straightforward as it seems.
Well, I should say this. I don't know that study accurately reflects my experience with the dating world. Now, if it said, let's see, online daters, it says. So like, I would assume that means they're using dating apps, and then I could kind of get behind that statement. But if it just means like meeting somebody online, I don't think that that's an accurate statement.
But here's the real question. How does all this affect godly dating? Now, as a Christian, I just want to say there's nothing inherently wrong with using dating apps. Like, using them in itself is not the problem. In fact, I think they can be a great way to meet people you otherwise might never meet. But the issue I have is the culture that surrounds these apps. I mean, let's talk about it. How do these apps work? So you go on the app, you see a photo, maybe a few words, and in 2 seconds, you're already making a decision. Yes or no. If you don't like what you see, you swipe and you just move on. If you like what you see, you match, you chat, but if it doesn't feel perfect right away, you can just go back to swiping again. It trains us to approach relationships almost like fast food. Like, it's quick, convenient, and disposable. And the problem is, once you get used to that mindset, it doesn't just stay on these apps. It can bleed into how we treat real relationships too. But let's also look at the way these...
True. Yeah, if you're approaching dating as a discovery process, as something that is disposable, she keeps using that word over and over, then you can, if you're always thinking that something better is a couple swipes down the line or a couple scrolls through your more of a Facebook feed, then you're never going to actually be committed to something, and you're never going to experience the joys of a trusting and committed relationship. And I say that all the time, but it's definitely true. And you can totally paralyze yourself into never experiencing what an amazing marriage is. And by the way, marriage is amazing. If nobody's told you, marriage is the best, one of the best things like I have ever done. Other than following Jesus Christ, marriage is the best decision I have ever made by far, bar none. And anybody who says that marriage is a bad thing, I would argue is speaking from a place where they don't have a good marriage or has seen bad marriages modeled over and over and over and doesn't know what actually marriage can be if you do it right. People, again, who say that marriage is bad are assuming that it can't be done right. and that their approach to it is perfect, and that they couldn't have done anything better, and that their approach to it is not the problem.
Apps actually market themselves.
Now, the dating/networking app recently tried out the campaign with one ad reading, quote, "You know full well a vow of celibacy is not the answer." The campaign has been met with backlash.
A lot of people seem to be confused by OkCupid's new ad campaign. Take a look at some of these.
Yeah. If that's the message the biggest dating apps are pushing, it says a lot about where culture is headed. And the reality is, even Christians are right in the middle of this culture. A few days ago, I got curious. How many Christians are actually active on dating apps? See, I've never used one myself, so honestly, I couldn't even make an educated guess. But I found a survey of about 500 Christian singles and their dating habits, and honestly, the results kind of surprised me. Let's take a look. So first off, over 80% of them said they've tried online dating before. So that's a huge chunk. Basically,
tried. Keyword is tried there. They tried it. I would hazard a guess that their success on that platform, again, if you define success as the road to actually marriage and them getting married and committing themselves to a lifelong partner, I would guess that most of them are not going to arrive at that conclusion, but let's see.
Most single Christians are diving into the digital dating world. And it's not like they're just sticking to one app either. Like, almost half said they've tried 3 to 5 different platforms. So you can almost feel the pressure and even a little desperation in that. You know, they're trying everything.
I don't know if it's desperation. I think they're just trying it to see if it's an actually good way to find a partner. I don't know that you can say it's desperate just because, you know, they've tried 3 to 5 apps. Now, I do think that, again, you can do this wrong and you can just be sort of like swiping through and never picking somebody. And in that case, then nothing is going to work no matter how good the app you're using. So I think that's something to consider when you listen to that.
But they're still not finding what they're looking for. And people aren't swiping for the sake of it either. Like 74% have actually went on real life dates because of these apps. So they are meeting people, but think about it. When you're juggling multiple apps and talking to so many different people at once, it can get overwhelming. So it almost makes commitment harder instead of easier. And here's the interesting part. Christians are split right down the middle. So half say they're going to keep trying online dating, and the other half, I guess, have just given up. Now let's set aside online dating for a second and talk about something bigger. The values Christians hold when it comes to love and intimacy. Another survey found that about half of US Christians say casual sex is sometimes or even always acceptable. Half.
Dang.
So even if someone puts Christian on their dating profile, does that really mean they're approaching dating in a faithful way? Honestly, not always. But what is clear is that the culture around us is shaping how even believers approach love and intimacy. And that makes it even harder for people who do want to follow God to find a partner, because unfortunately, the reality is nowadays, calling yourself Christian doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually living it out. These numbers show that Christians aren't off in their own separate bubble. Like, we're right in the middle of modern dating culture, using the same apps, looking for the same things, and sometimes even adopting the same values as everyone else. So I guess the last question to answer is, what does all of this really mean for us as people of faith? As followers of Christ, we're called to live differently. Romans chapter 12 verse 2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And that has to shape the way we approach dating too. The truth is, the purpose of dating hasn't really changed. It's still meant to lead to marriage, covenant, and family. What has changed is the culture's view of love. We don't need to reinvent dating. We just need to recover God's original design.
Amen.
That means choosing patience in a world that tells us to rush.
If someone prays for patience, you think God gives them patience? Or does He give them the opportunity to be patient?
It means seeing singleness not as waiting, but as God preparing us. And above all, it means putting Him first. Because if our relationship with God isn't strong, no other relationship will ever be. So maybe the takeaway isn't really about dating at all. It's about learning to see love the way God does.
Love is always patient and kind. It is always ready to excuse, to trust, to hope, and to endure whatever comes.
After all, He is love.
Really good video, man. I mean, I love this woman's style of YouTube creation. I mean, she puts a lot of work into these videos. She scripts everything out. She plans everything really well. I don't know that I like the way she ended her video there, saying basically that it doesn't matter as long as you're, pursuing becoming more like God and his perfect love, then your dating approach doesn't really matter. I don't know if she was exactly saying that, but I kind of got that flavor in my mouth, because kind of how you approach dating does really matter, because some things work and some things don't. And again, if your ultimate goal is to get married and you're in service to what God has designed you for, then it is going to matter how you approach that. So I loved this video, though. I don't like the way she necessarily ended right there by saying that maybe dating isn't the problem. It's just people not, basically becoming more like God. It's like we can always become more like God, but how you approach dating actually does matter too. And obviously, I would agree with the statement that we need to be always becoming, more like God, being transformed by the renewing of our mind and all that. Like, that's totally scriptural. I'm just saying, like, there's wisdom too. Like, how you approach dating does matter, and you can approach it in a good way or a bad way. You can date through a good method, or you can date through a bad method. You can date to one end or to another end, and your goal, should be, and I've argued, in hundreds of episodes before this, that your goal in dating should be to get married, and not just to get married, but to have a happy marriage with your partner, and to lay down your life for your partner, to pick up your cross for your partner, and to serve your partner as Christ served the church, and to make sure that your partner has the same goal and is on the same team as you, and is 100% committed and 100% invested in the relationship, matching you in every area of attraction and romantic investment and commitment and interest and everything. So just like, if there's a mismatch in any of that, then you are like textbook unequally yoked, even if you're both believers, because that person is going to leave, or you're going to leave, and that union is going nowhere. You both have to be 100% committed, invested, and in the relationship. And so that's kind of where I'll end this video. If you guys enjoyed, reach out and let me know what you thought of it through the link in the show notes. I hope it has helped you and taught you something today. I hope you've learned something. And I want you in the YouTube comments to give me a comment about something you learned that you did not know prior to coming into this video. That would really be encouraged by that. And it would, prompt me to, make it easier for me to make more content for you. So thank you so much for considering that and making this conversation a conversation instead of a monologue. I appreciate you. Give me a 5-star written, or a 5-star rating and a written review wherever you listen. And I will talk to you guys next time. God bless.